Good evening. The Halloween season is upon us with ghouls and haints and boogers. And why not bring those into your tabletop role playing game experience with uh, Empire of the Undying Sun? Empire is a horror role playing game for Dungeons and Dragons AD&D 1E and 5th edition. We have all sorts of horror in the woods. We have zombie invasions, swashbuckling pirate adventures, jungles teeming with wildlife that wish to devour your flesh, howling of ghosts and spirits on the desert winds, and ancient ruins that may have magical items or they may contain your ruin. You can find it all on Empire of the Undying Sun. We are officially on Kickstarter until we have 17 more days to go. October 30. That is the last day to get it in. We are 2/3 there. So come check us out. And tonight we have an extra special guest, a man who knows his way around horror art. And he also knows what art is horrorable. Both of which we will probably talk about some tonight. The one, the only, the man who draws vacuum cleaning headwear, Fabrizio Ayala.
Hello. I always like the idea that you're thinking of horror and you immediately think of me. Like, what is the most hideous form of human that I can think of? Oh, Fabrizio.
Well, it's because your imagery is so evocative.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
So, horror has been with us pretty much since people were putting charcoal onto cave walls. What do you think possessed people, then as well as now? But why the horror instead of like daisies and sunshine?
Right. So, this is going to sound pretentious, but what do you like? I can't help myself, right? Because I was thinking about this, and when you're in traffic, you can either do one of two things. You can scream at people and flip them off, which I'm not saying I don't do, or you can think really pretentious thoughts and hope that one day you'll be able to say them on a podcast or a YouTube stream. But it is a good question. Like, why horror? Why scare people? Like, currently we do it mostly for entertainment's sake, and we can kind of put a pin in that and get to that later. But I think in the beginning, it was a way to show, like, to keep people from doing things that they might not know the answer to. So, like, and this is going to be a terrible example, like, we don't want the village to go up by the mountain because there's some poisonous something. Maybe we don't understand it. It's a bacteria, it's a virus, or whatever. We don't know what it is, but we come up with this scary story about a witch that lives in the woods up by the mountain. So this keeps the village away from that area. It's essentially what we call like a metaphorical truth instead of a literal truth. So yeah, I kind of think that's like the very first like reason for doing something like that. Cautionary tale, exactly.
Yeah. I tend to agree. I think that's probably where horror stories come from. Like once you get past to like, well, Og got eaten by that leopard. Leopards suck. Once you get past that kind of horror story, and you're getting into the more symbolic stuff, I definitely see where that can take you, and and I think it's that plus the beginning of religions, where depending on how you view religion, it could be your religion started at the beginning of time, and this is just a time when people are more aware of it. Or if you're on the secular side that says people made up religions, this is kind of the time where um, people turned like their innermost fears and started mixing and mashing and yeah, getting prohibitions out there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, people would claim that that's how you quote unquote control people.
Mhm.
Um, I still don't think it's necessarily. I mean, in some cases, it absolutely is that. There's no doubt about it. But there is just this a way to visually like show something that you can't particularly articulate. And when we were
Mhm.
talking about this, I started to think, I'm like, what is the first like horror art that I could think of? And I didn't know if this was right, but the first thing I thought of was Hieronymus Bosch's Earthly Delights.
Mm.
And because it's pretty horrific, right? And it's a depiction of hell. And it had to function as like the most horrific thing anybody had seen, up until that point. Like to see, if somebody says you're going to hell, it's a place where you burn in eternity, and this would have been after Dante. So Dante did a good like description of it, right? But to see it actually shown, like the hell part of it, it's like chaos and supernatural, just insanity. Um, I think that was the first thing that came to mind for me. I'm like, it is pretty horrific. Nobody would say, "I want to live in the hell part of Hieronymus Bosch's Earthly Delights painting."
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I think so. I think a lot of that stuff sort of. I think you can even go back earlier, like different cave paintings where you start to see animal human hybrids. Like there's some that look like humans, but they have antlers of deer, and there's some where there's very large men compared to like smaller beings. We don't know if it's just like giants versus regular people or something else, and they tend to have extremely large phalluses and don't seem to be um, nice about it. Let's put it that way.
Right. So
Uh,
can I ask you?
mhm.
Because I
Yep.
thought about that. It may look horrific to us, but do you think that was their intent? Or they're just capturing fantasy tale? Like you said, they're just capturing
Mm.
things. Do you think the intent was to like scare people though? And I don't know the answer. It was just like I wonder.
That's a good question. I would tend to say yes. Um, I mean, maybe not all of them, but I think that a lot of them were probably like we think of like Grimm's fairy tales,
Yeah.
where there's like sort of a social message. Don't go with everybody offering you candy. Beware cats wearing boots and stuff like that. I think that back in caveman days, they probably had similar things, and it's like maybe, and maybe it was like pseudo historical, like we were driven out of this lush forest and we're living in these caves because these horrible people who they're like with the spirits of bears chased us out, and so it's like a mixture of like a warning plus propaganda, or it could be the other way around, like justification. Why do we always kill people from this tribe? Well, it's because they did this.
Yeah.
And I think art, uh, as opposed to stories in some ways. Like I'm sure people had noticed, oral storytelling, like things would change over time. I'm sure if you had some old guy, he would have been like, well, in my day, when I was a kid, it was told this way.
Yeah.
Um, whereas like that art on the rock wall doesn't change. And it can be generation after generation passing on that prohibition, that warning.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if they would have just how they would have viewed it, and it, like you said, it could just been it have multiple like reasons or justifications for it. A little bit of like scare people, historical. So I get that. Um, I definitely think, and not to bring it back to Bosch, because there's other painters that
Oh yeah.
depicted hell, but hell, I do think that depiction is like, okay, we want to make this the scariest thing we can in order to get you to realize how bad it is. The one thing I kept on thinking about though is like there can be like a, I hate to say this, but a beauty in like the horror art as well.
Hmm.
Um, because I think if you look at what we consider to be sort of across the globe beautiful art or idealized, I think you can get virtually everybody to agree that the Statue of David, blah blah blah, this is beautiful, it's ideal, or whatever. I do think horror has much more like variability and
Yep.
subjectivity, from like gore and grotesque up into just like unease.
Hmm.
Like there's something odd about that, the pallor of that portrait or something.
Yeah. Do you think that? Well, I mean, I think that horror is what different cultures find to be horror. Uh, it can definitely change, and once you like it, it's kind of hard. So, like when I was writing Empire of the Undying Sun, I was just writing horror stuff, and I didn't realize I was doing American horror until much later. And then it's like, oh, that's what's going on.
Hmm.
Because each society will have different concerns based on its morality, based on its socioeconomic makeup. Um, but do you think that is horror that sort of like transcends that and encompasses all of humankind?
Well, it took me two commutes, and the answer is no. But
Oh, okay, interesting.
but I don't think so. I wanted to say two things. As I was like mulling this over, I came to a realization, and this is a huge realization after like 7, 8 years of Horace H. Hoover, right? And I'm like, well, I don't really have anything horrific in Horace H. Hoover. There's
Mhm.
like elements or whatever, but not what I would consider horror. And then it literally just struck me. I am the worst claustrophobic, like claustrophobe you've ever met in your entire life. I don't even like elevators. Like I cannot stand locked doors in rooms. And I'm like, Horace H. Hoover has a canister over his head. To me, that would literally be like the worst torture I can think of, and it literally never occurred to me until you brought up this, and I don't know why. But yeah, and because of that, I think it's so subjective from our personal phobias. Um, I mean, other than the fear of death, but
Mhm.
I feel like that's so generic.
It's true.
Like culturally and sort of like trend wise, Lovecraft is super popular right now.
Yep.
Cosmic horror and weird fiction, and sometimes it's zombies. But I think that's just because it's something new, and people are looking for new ways to be kind of scared.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lovecraft, he's definitely a product of his times because he's in a part of history where you're coming on the scientific age, and people, I don't want to say they don't believe in God in the 1920s, but it's like there's more to the universe than just us, the different planets and this and that. And so like, oh, we're actually kind of small and maybe we are insignificant. And then the other thing is there was a very popular trend in Christianity at the time that, well, God is kind of like the watchmaker and he just winds things up and he sets it go. He's not interfering on our behalf. Whereas in centuries past, it would be, you pray, you do different, excuse me, different forms of penance, and God will come and assist you, or he'll send you an angel or something.
Yeah, yeah, and I wonder too, like specifically weird fiction and the Lovecraftian stuff. I think the main element for weird fiction is it involves the reader or viewer much more than other art. Like if you watch like a slasher flick or something, there's really nothing that as a watcher or consumer that you need to like. There's no extra levels that you need to explore, in Friday the 13th or something like that. But for weird fiction, it really like it brings you in. It doesn't explain everything, right? Like
Yep.
it's always going to leave some elements to your imagination unsaid, so you're constantly like getting pulled into the story in that way. Um, but I do think it's just a trend. Again, back to your question, I don't think there's like a universal horror element or subject. Do you?
I think there's a few. I think one is seeing people's insides. So that's where you get gore.
Yeah.
But things where you have intestines coming out or seeing organs, I think just instinctually, that's very frightening to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I would say throughout the different cultures, snakes. Um, Not everyone is going to be afraid of snakes, but it's fairly universal. Maybe if you found some culture that's in a place where there are no snakes, they wouldn't be afraid of them. But I think most, like, it's almost in our DNA
Yeah.
at this point. And I would say the other one is loss of control.
Mm.
Why were zombies so popular when they were sort of first resurrected? Because that's you, but you're no longer in control of yourself. Same with 1919 German film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. There was this is back when hypnotism was just coming out, and they thought like they could, hypnotists could put you to sleep and make you do whatever. So like that was scared. Same thing with Dracula and his making. When he makes people into vampires, they're basically his slaves. You have to do what he wants. You have no autonomy anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I like all of those. Let's kind of take them apart. So the fear of like intestines and like bodily
Hmm.
organs, I definitely dislike that. It's one of those things where I don't like gore or slasher flicks because of that. Um, but I don't think it scares me, in a way that if you said Fabrizio, you're going to be in a locked room. I want to make a joke. I won't. You're going to be in a locked room with a crazy person. That scare like the thought of that scares
Hmm.
me.
Yeah.
Um, so I think I don't know. There's a distinction in my head between like revulsion and like horror or fear. What was the other one? Snakes. Yeah, that's a good one. Like snakes and sharks. And there is something I do think that is cross cultural, cross time. There's something in the imagery that I mean we can't really articulate. What was the last one? Fear of
Um,
loss of control.
yeah.
I actually was going to mention that in the earthly delights thing. To me, that's what hell is in that image. It's just pure chaos, and I totally agree in that. Like you have an expectation that you know what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes, and if that is severely like interrupted, it causes like a constant fear and unease. So, um, I get that. The fear of death for me, it just seems a little too. I don't know. I think the fear of dying, not necessarily the fear of death. Like being like
Yeah.
feeling pain before you die, I think is more universal. But I don't think a lot of people really fear death. I know it's a trope,
Mm,
we'll say.
I don't know. I think a lot of people do, especially in years past. When the way you lived your life directly concerns where you're going after you die. Some people very well may have been afraid of where they're going.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's hard for me to say like universally. Um, it's a lot easier for me to say universally. Everybody will agree in some standard of beauty, I think. But I think horror. I just feel like it's more subjective. Like if you said Fabrizio, what's worse, worse, death, or having a tin can on my head, I would say a tin can like a thousand
Well,
times.
sure, sure.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So
I
that's where
mean,
I feel like the subjectivity is in play.
well, horror definitely has a lot of subjectivity, and I think it's influenced on the personal. Like, for example, you could be claustrophobic because you had a traumatic experience, or because it's that's just the way you are. Um, but there's also if in your culture snakes are evil, you're really gonna fear snakes. If it's communist, you're really gonna fear communists. So culturally, and then of course family. Like if your mom was terrified of bees, you might be afraid of bees. That
Hmm.
kind of thing.
Yeah, I can see that. As far as like in art, I mean, what do we at like bird's eye view, like as far as trends, does that give us any sort of like insight into cultures like that we know personally? Like, what can we say about American horror over the past 100 years
Mm.
that looking at the horror, what does that say about like the society at any given time?
Oh,
Um,
I think it says tons.
yeah,
When did zombie movies get big? It was Night of the Living Dead.
yeah,
It was 62,
yeah.
somewhere around there. I'd have to look it up. But you have um, that was expressing a lot of the social issues with race relations in the U.S. at the time. You have like Body Snatchers, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is very much an anti-communist
Yeah.
propaganda piece. The oh my god, what's it called? Twilight Zone. Like I think after the U.S. is done and gone as a country in centuries yet to come, people who study the history of the American nation or empire or whatever you want to call it, they're gonna watch the Twilight Zone because that was like such a perfect um, set of analogies or bringing up all sorts of problems with the human conditions in 50s and 60s.
I totally agree. And oddly, it sounds like a Twilight Zone episode. like like
Yeah.
it sounds like a perfect Twilight Zone episode. I definitely agree. I do think so. Do you think we like post hoc look at those horror films and apply the societal stuff to it? Um, and the other thing too is, what about people that hate horror? Like, I mean, there's a lot of people that hate horror, and I have no concept of like percentages. You know what I mean? Like, is it 50-50 people love? I don't know, 20-80?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, well, people not liking horror. I mean, there's always people who don't like the color red or some music or whatever. So some of it's just not for them. But I think some of those people are scared. Some of them don't want to think about the deeper themes in some of the movies. And a lot of it is just pure crap, which could be another reason why. Like, if anybody knows the history of Hollywood, from the 70s at least through the 90s, if not continuing today, virtually any horror movie would get greenlit because they were very cheap to make and they always made their money back, especially after VHS came out.
Yeah,
People would always rent that kind of stuff at home. So most of them are just terrible. You have some that um, they should be terrible, but just somehow work, like the first Purge. I
I
think
never saw it, but
it's.
I know of it. Yeah,
I mean, it looks stupid, but it really does have something to say, and I think that's horror and sci-fi. Excuse me, are sort of the two mediums where you can talk about social issues and problems in a way that doesn't really get you in trouble. Whereas, like, if you're doing it in like a drama, it becomes very ham-fisted.
yeah.
But if it's like, if it's all the neighbors in your cul-de-sac turning on each other during a power outage, that you know that works.
Yeah, I guess I until you mentioned that, I never thought about that, but that's a great point. Like sci-fi is like the ultimate what if machine, and
Hmm.
horror can absolutely be that, despite all of the like trauma films and
Yeah.
no offense to anybody that loves the trauma films. I so as far as the horror films that I like, they're pretty subtle. Like they're not gory. Again, it's a lot of like Lovecraftian atmosphere. Like that's my
Mhm.
favorite stuff. Like when Cthulhu shows up, I'm like, eh, you know. It's the cult stuff. It's finding the books. It's like it's this tone and atmosphere, with the unease I was talking about that I really like. Um, do you think, and this is sort of out of the blue, but do you think that people that don't watch horror films live happier lives? Now, and then the reason I say this, I'll just use like a small anecdote. When I was, I think, 5 or 6 years old, there was a movie called Silent. It's a Chuck Norris movie, Silent something. But anyway, the premise is there's a guy, he goes crazy, he chops up his family in the backyard one day. They execute him, they keep him alive, they pump him with drugs, he's unstoppable, and Chuck Norris has to fight him, and he's basically unkillable. Now, I was very young when this happened, but there are some scenes that to this day, like, really traumatized me. And I just wonder if I hadn't seen that movie about this guy chopping up his family when I was 5 or 6 or whatever. Silent Rage, yes, that's right. Now, I'm sure if you watch it today, it's probably the cheesiest thing in the world. But when you're like 6, I'm telling you, this thing is. Um... Anyway, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I watched The Exorcist when I was 10 at a party. Not the movie you should be showing a 10-year-old. Um, yeah, I think it really depends. That's sort of another issue where I think that children are often exposed to things that are too mature for them too young. Like I think in some ways you can ease them in. Like if you had just watched Scooby Doo, you would probably be okay with horror, even though some of that stuff is really kind of messed up when
Yeah.
you look at it now. Um, but it's like more appropriate. I think stuff like that, or like um, not actual snuff films, but like if you see a dog getting shot in a movie, or people dying or whatever. I think if it's too young, and you're not able to handle that, I think it could very well mess you up. It could, in some ways, it could be like, they used to do, if they caught a kid smoking, they'd make him smoke the whole pack until he
Yeah.
puked.
It's like you got to watch all the Hellraisers, um, or all the Candyman. Yeah. So I don't know if being exposed to like any all horror films as a child, um, made me shy away from the gore a little more as I got older. Because again, my favorite horror films, quote unquote, are like The Ninth Gate, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they're real. You know, I like psychological like
Mhm.
thrillers, with a little horror elements to it. But if you get too gory and slashy, I don't know, something about it. Um, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. Um, so what, I think when, we were sort of talking about like going all the way back to cave paintings and whatnot. I think art then went through like sort of a propaganda phase once we start getting into organized religions. And I think even there, it can show a lot about a culture. So, like, if you look at the ancient Egyptian gods, they would have anthropomorphic gods where they would have the head of an animal and the body of a human. And if you look at all like the sort of negative aspects, things that people really didn't like, look, it's not like um, or they feared the Nile, for example, and so the god of the Nile was a frog, and they had alligator. dang, I forget her name, but they assigned more and more scary things to animals that you would find scary
Hmm.
as iconography. And so I think like then you sort of get to this religious uh, inception where with you end up stupid. See if we can. That's not great. Let's try this. Nope, that's not great either. Zoom in.
I
There we
think it's good.
then you end up later on with Christianity with stuff like this, where it becomes, excuse me, very much prophetic, very much warning. And I don't think it's until you get to the 1800s when we start to have a different need for horror.
Yeah, I totally. I mean, a lot of that really is just where the money was at, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
so a lot of this stuff gets commissioned, and you get a lot of patrons that want this particular stuff. But you're right. It kind of, it's like, here's some demons, here's hell, here's some demons, here's some hell. Um, I had heard that, one of the reasons that Lovecraft wanted to do like his, cosmic alien monsters, was sort of because everything was angels and demons up until that
Mhm.
point, and that was his sort of just trying something different. Um, and it's funny because I'm sorry, I'm pulling this out of nowhere, but it's just one of those things I think about. The one thing that's always kind of bugged me about the Lovecraft stuff is like he does take the cults, the like worship part of it, but then he adds these alien gods. But I'm like, well, you've got alien gods. Why are they like praying these weird? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
to me, there's a disconnect. If he's an alien god
Mm.
from whatever, what does chanting have anything to do with anything? And you could, I mean, you could do like all right, well, the syllables make a resonant. Yeah, I get it. You can always pull that out of your butt, but
Yeah, I think part of that with Lovecraft specifically was he really well, first of all, if you look at who's in those cults, it's not waspy people. So
no.
that was part of it. I think it was uh kind of an indictment on human beings that people would worship whatever they thought was greater or
Mm.
whatever would get them a benefit. um, Not the waspy people, totally wouldn't do that, but everyone else.
Um, no, that's true. That's a good point. So, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but going back to your point
Mhm.
about how it was essentially churches showing us every version of hell
Yep.
possible, to keep people in line and to, it's still artistic expression because they were consumed with this concept anyway. So it wasn't like
Yep.
they were thinking about, TikTok and they were just kept on spammed pictures, images of hell. So when do you think the first like sort of original like horror image outside of like the religious side? I couldn't think of any.
Mm.
I mean, because to me, it's just it's hand in hand for so long until you get to like the
Yeah.
20th century
Well, I mean, it's hard to
or
say
19th century.
because what got left over. Well, what got left and preserved were churches in the West, temples in other parts of the world. There are some. Well, no, those are kind of. I mean, there are horrific images on like Hindu temples and like various Buddhist paintings, um, but outside of religion, it's hard to say because your personal sketchbook probably didn't survive, throughout the ages. Um,
Yeah.
but certainly, I think in once we get in the 1800s, you start to see more like that's when you start getting action novels and adventure novels, and um, you do have penny dreadfuls, and
Yeah.
so certainly by that point, um, and I think to me, it's like the fall of the spiritual world, where, if you go back to even through the 1500s, like it was you thought you were beset on all sides, spiritually by demons and whatnot, as well as and that was manifesting itself in the physical world by enemies of the faith
Yeah.
and cults and all sorts of other things. So I think it's when that starts going away in the 1800s, um, that's when you really start to see horror shift. And we kind of have a new way of living at that point too. We start getting electricity, we have mechanized things, and so like that's a good time for this new sort of horror to come in.
Yeah, I mean, and I didn't do even like the most cursory of Google searches, but
Yeah.
at least in my head, Frankenstein's like the real first like horror novel.
Hmm.
I know there's a lot of gothic horror, but like I just don't think they compare to like Frankenstein as far as
Yeah.
just like so we'll use the 1850s as a time period. Yeah, so it really is such a like it's a new thing, 150 years old, out of like the span of history that we really, and that's why in the past 100 years, I mean, and I don't know if America is sort of like at the forefront of horror or not, as far as like the universal monsters, and I know a lot of that is like
Hmm.
popularized, but it seems like we really just start churning out horror after
Yeah.
sort of like I guess the German expressionist stuff, and then you got the Hollywood studios, and after that, it's just like any creepy image or anything we can think of gets thrown out there.
Yeah, I think part of it has to do with our lifestyles. You know, earlier in the 20th century, you had famine. You don't really have hunger anymore. Uh, there are still some places, especially in the U.S., where wild animal attacks are a real concern, but most people in the world aren't worried about that. And we were relatively stable, so war hasn't really touched us that much, especially on the home front. So to me, a lot of the modern horror is kind of like Thunder Mountain at Disney. You want the feeling of danger, of fear, without actually having something bad happening.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because I think about like it's Friday night. Me and my wife are about to sit down, watch a movie, order some pizza, have some cake. It's the most comfortable atmosphere ever,
Hmm.
right? So, and we're like, hey, let's watch a scary movie. But if instead of that, we're like, okay, we have to barricade the windows, we have to load the catapults, we have to, you know, if we have to fortify our defenses, we're not gonna be like, hey, let's watch a scary movie.
Yeah.
Because that could be our life in 5 minutes, somebody busting through the door. So I do think there's something to be said about that. Um, so yeah, they do say that like I guess in the 70s, there was a lot of like depressing movies, a lot of,
Hmm.
and then the 80s was sort of like the inverse of that. It was very hopeful because we had nuclear war, threat of nuclear war, we had all this other stuff going on. I don't know what, if we had to say 2025 is, it's definitely on the brink of a lot of things.
Yeah.
We're not in the midst of anything per se. So,
We're like 1914 Europe, or perhaps 1931 Europe.
oh
That's
no.
where we're at.
Still hopeful, but
I'm sure they were too. But no, I don't know. I think part of it is part of what people like in horror. I think is sort of a pseudo spirituality, where you're touching on a lot of those notes, like you need Christian symbolism to beat vampires. You Other things that like kind of solidify the world and make it a little more sane with certain rules.
hmm.
Shoot a zombie in the head, not in the leg. Things like that. Different. different hauntings, spooky movies.
I have heard this floated around. It's partly a joke, I'm sure, but we've been essentially the government has been preparing us for the end of the world by doing all the Walking Dead movies. So that way, we would everybody would get used to the idea of no power and food and having to survive off the land, which I thought was hilarious. But we've all at some point in time in the past 6 years for sure thought, okay, how would I live? Do I have a generator? Do I
Hmm.
have food? Like, do I have ammo? Like, so it is out there, but we have been so coddled for so long that I think it's such a hard pill to swallow, even if it is right around the corner.
Yeah, and I mean, I think too that's why certain other kinds of movies, like not horror genres, but heroic fantasy. It's one reason why Lord of the Rings still holds up because there's a definite right and a definite wrong, and you're doing everything to fight against, whatever is the perceived evil, um, versus like, you go to your job and get a Starbucks, and
Yeah.
it's not the most heroic of things. But I think that there is sort of a spiritual need, that you're getting a little drip of dopamine for those things that used to be part of everyday life, but now like there's something missing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, as a dude, we've all imagined scenarios where we've had to fight
Yeah.
things to survive. It's literally, it's what we do. So that's a good point. We're just kind of, we put in Braveheart to see, okay, in this scenario, how would I act? Would I do this? Is this what I'm supposed to do? Um, and as we both know, um, sort of modern Hollywood and modern entertainment has failed epically in that
Yep.
sort of like vision. So we always have to go back to these old. Okay, I know things are messed up. This is where we might go for some answers. We can't go there because they will tell us to be evil. We've got to
Yep.
go. We've got to mine these old movies and these old books and these old things to kind of see what makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's good horror should always have some element of truth in it. And part of that truth might be like Alien is a great example because it's just it could be a wolf, it could be an octopus, it could
Hmm.
be a white whale. It's some creature that there's no reasoning with it. It's just there to kill. And what would you do? And I think a good horror movie explores like, I'm scared for myself, am I gonna take one for the team, am I gonna save everyone else, or do I just save myself? And so there's a lot of good excuse me, good elements in that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I always think of Jaws.
Hmm.
It is a horror film. I mean,
Yep.
it's action, but like ultimately, it's pretty horrific. And just having that not unthinking, but that just like that evil thing that, like you said, you don't need to empathize with the shark in Jaws.
Yep.
Oh, maybe he has a family. Oh, maybe he likes to paint on the
Yeah.
weekends. We shouldn't kill him. So what are some of your like go-to horror films or franchises?
Oh, that's a good question. Depends on what I'm into at the moment. I think Evil Dead series is fantastic. I think Evil Dead 2 perfect. So horror is like, it's kind of like ketchup. It goes with just about anything. So for me, it's like the perfect pairing of horror plus comedy. Like it's not so much comedy that it's stupid, and um, it's not so much horror that it's just like the first one is actually a little much for me. Evil Dead
Yeah.
1. Evil Dead 2 is hilarious, but it still has enough scary moments and things to make you afraid that I think it works. Um,
I think
yeah, I don't know. Mhm.
Evil Dead's a great. because it spans, like you said. The first
Yeah.
one is it's intense, and I don't know how many times I've watched the first one. Not that many. I've watched two and three far more than one. Um, yeah, Evil Dead's a great example, and I totally agree about humor. I need
Isn't that the plot of Jaws 3?
is it, no.
I
Oh,
I think so because wasn't it like the family that's in the aquarium,
I
or maybe
think
that's
you're
Jaws 4?
I think you're right. That does sound vaguely familiar, which is really funny. Um, yeah, the humor thing is huge for me because it, like you said, it doesn't make a difference what's going on. If we look at just like everyday occupations, whether it's surgeons in like
Mhm.
the ER or whatever horrific scenario it is, there is a lot of times an element of humor, like in real life.
Yep.
So if there is no humor, like to me, I'm like, this doesn't feel real. It feels fabricated and contrived because, and it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't have to be goofy humor, but there has to be some element of humor. If not, I usually just check out. As far as my favorites, like I said, The Ninth Gate, I love
Yeah.
Sleepy Hollow, anything with Johnny Depp and horror.
Ooh,
Um,
I
what was
like the
that?
TV show too, Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, that was really good.
Especially the first and second seasons were fantastic.
Yeah,
After that, it was a little.
yeah, that was Len Weissman who that he directed the Underworld trilogy or
Oh,
yeah, so
interesting.
he did. I thought that was really well done. Yeah, I like old books and occult stuff. Love Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the usual. I like Phantasm, which is sort is it's.
Yes.
I don't think it gets enough like credit. It's
It.
such a like a I don't want to say beautiful movie, but it's got some really great visuals that you don't see in anything else.
Yeah, that's kind of the '80s horror franchise that was forgotten. Everyone remembers Freddy. Everyone remembers Jason.
Yeah, Phantasm was great. What? Man, I love The Ninth Gate. I watch that every single year. That and Sleepy Hollow and some other ones.
Yeah, no, I like Ninth Gate. It was well done. It's not, if you like people getting ripped apart, it's not probably the movie for you. But
Yeah,
especially if you're interested in religious themes.
yeah, it's so fun. Yeah, as far as like new movies, horror films, I have been liking the Conjuring stuff. I think those were pretty well done. They're
Hmm.
not too gratuitous, I think. Um, I don't watch very many.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think now part of the problem is there's too much revisionism in them. Like I liked actually there was a show on Netflix, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which is sort of the Sabrina the Teenage Witch reboot.
Okay.
I thought the first season was actually really well done and very interesting because it was playing with the whole idea of uh, can you be good without Jesus?
Hmm.
Like because the whole thing is like her father was a warlock, but her mom was Catholic, and her mom had her baptized as a baby, but Satan wants her, and like the rest of her family, there are all Satanists. So
Oh, Jesus.
she's like, well, screw you, Satan, um, and like doesn't want to pledge her soul to him, but yet at the same time she's not like going to church and stuff like that. So she's
Hmm.
trying to walk that middle line. And that was an interesting thing that they totally effed up in the second season and like never thought of again. But
I'll
that
have to
first season was great.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I mean yeah, you can present like wild moral
Yeah.
questions, when you're dealing in horror like that you couldn't get anywhere else. Somebody posted one could say it's the too vast, endless, ravenous hunger of the sea itself. Ravenous. Remember that movie? Was that the name of it? The cannibals. Um,
Oh yeah. Yeah. That I think is another universal well, I shouldn't say universal because there are cannibal tribes, so they
it's
must be
pretty
cool
close
with
to
it.
universal though. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Cannibalism. Now that you mention it, it makes me think of Bone Tomahawk, which if anybody's seen
Yeah.
that, that is a horrific like If it's a great movie, awesome dialogue, but if you're squeamish, the end of that movie,
Yeah, I know.
yeah, you will not be eating ribs for months at least. But it's a good movie. I mean, that's the other thing too. You can really have you can take any genre and make it horror. And Bone Tomahawk is it really starts off as this cool western with
Hmm.
freaking Kurt Russell, and some other guys too, right? And it just turns into horror, and I like that aspect too. You can start somewhere
Yeah.
and just go to horror.
Yeah, I think that is one of the problems with a lot of modern horror is it's too self-referential, and it's like too much you have to know the genre to or too much playing with the genre so it takes out what made it good. So like you can start with a movie like Scream, which I did enjoy Scream
Hmm.
overall because it was kind of like the first one that broke it down and played with that stuff. But after that, it got worse and worse. Like I watched, I can't think of the name, but it's like I think it just came out this year, and it's like a bunch of black people rent an Airbnb cabin in the woods, and they're slowly being killed by another by one of their party members because like 8 years ago they told him he wasn't black enough, and like they kicked him out of a party or something, and he went to jail and something. And it's like, man, this could have been really good because it was sort of playing on like the cabin in the woods type of movie,
Yeah.
except they didn't kill enough people. It's like all the friends except for there were two people that died in the beginning, and then like nobody else dies. It's like what's going on? If you're going to do the whole thing,
Yeah.
then go for it and make it like a real one, but
Yeah,
did not work.
you got to commit because there are expectations, and if they're not
Yeah.
met, you're just gonna like, yeah, I don't, you
Yeah.
know, because almost everybody has to die, and there has to be at least one death where they think they're good, they're dead, but they're not, and they come back later. Um, yeah, Scream was fun back in the day. I haven't watched that in a well, I don't know. Yeah, I haven't watched the original in I don't know how long, but I remember at the time I was of the age where I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this is the newest franchise, that's out.
Yeah. I don't know. I sort of look back with a little cringe at stuff I liked back then. I really liked Pulp Fiction back at the time, and now it's like, oh.
I haven't watched that in 20 years probably. But The Hateful Eight is one of my favorite movies. Absolutely love that movie.
Hateful Eight, in my opinion, was better done. Like Tarantino is he's like the best B movie director that ever was.
And he's definitely not horror, but man, there's gore.
Yeah.
He just likes to take a genre and just distill it and then just inject it with crack, basically. It's just like in some ways it's a pastiche of a bunch of other movies from that genre,
Yeah.
and then it gets Tarantino eyes. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because Hateful Eight is, it's a great movie. He's done some other great movies. But Pulp Fiction is one of those movies I wonder if it would hold up. I haven't seen it in 20 years or something.
Yeah. I tried watching it a few years ago, and it's like it's too much random stuff thrown together. Um, and it came out in a time before Family Guy, when I think you could sort of get away with that because it wasn't overdone.
Yeah.
But like the the Family Guy style of humor is just like throw random stuff happening. It doesn't have to make sense, and it doesn't have to be funny in and of itself. And
Yeah.
that juxtaposition makes it funny. That's kind of what I feel with Pulp Fiction. Like,
Yeah, I can see that. I have come to hate Family Guy. I have a small story that I need to tell. So when I was in high school, it was some sort of dance, Sadie Hawkins or some like fall
mhm.
dance. Friend of mine's sister owned a costume shop. So we just said, you know what, let's go get some costumes. He was a full gorilla and I was a chicken, head to toe. And I said, you know what? We're headed to the dance. Let me stop back at my house real quick. They don't know I'm doing this. I'm just going to go in and kind of scare them. So I knock on the door, full chicken, and my brother answers the door and I attack him. So I start slapping him around. Now he has no idea that this chicken at the door is accosting him is his brother. Eventually, hey, it's me and all this kind of stuff. And then I find out 10 years later, or whatever, 15 years later, the family guy has some random chicken show up and start attacking the dad. And it becomes, wait, I did this in person like 20 years ago. So I just had to put that out there. I did it first in person.
Yeah, it always makes me wonder if like someone hears your stories and then they steal them.
I don't know. Part of me thinks that, but
I've got a cousin who used to live in New York, and she swears that somebody stole her idea for Will and Grace.
well, I did hear a long time ago that like SNL writers and sitcom
Mhm.
writers, because they're on such a schedule, that they will go and like steal like bits and jokes from comedians anywhere they can find them on Facebook posts, like, so it's not out of the realm of possibility because they're on such a like a strict schedule.
Yeah, yeah. So getting back to horror a little bit, um, how do you, as an artist, like, do you think there are any universals, or what methods do you like to use to create an atmosphere of fear or dread? Uh,
Yeah. So I mean, I'm going to use Horace H. Hoover. Although to be honest, whenever I first started drawing, I did comic books a lot, and then I kind of quickly went into the horror fantasy stuff, much more than comic book stuff. For some reason, superheroes were fun to draw, but not as fun to draw as like a skeleton coming out of the grave. Like it
yeah.
didn't, especially with pen and ink. I was a big pen and ink guy, so I it wasn't long before I really started to do horror and fantasy stuff, and um, I think it's. I know this sounds crazy. To some degree, it's like texture, and that texture can come from anything. And if you look at like a brand new sort of like clean hospital, or if you walk into the abandoned wing of the hospital, that it's got dust and there's weird like that texture of the abandoned wing of the hospital immediately is like more scary and creepy because of
Mhm.
the things that might have gone through it. So I think there's a reason that you see Bernie Wrightson and everything is just extraordinarily textured, and there's a lot of contrast. There's lights, there's darks.
Yeah.
If you went over a Bernie Wrightson drawing and had like Klaus Janson ink him, that's not the same thing at all.
Yeah,
So that's the
absolutely.
first thing that comes to mind when you say that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's a lot of the black and white and contrasty stuff. I kind of wonder if that is hidden very deep in our psychology, where you have like the lights and the darks. Does that go back to us living in, on the plains, and all you had was a torch to light your way at
Hmm.
night? And, so there would be huge contrast. Just like things that are underlit always tend to be creepy, even if, it's your dad. Like if your dad is
Yeah.
underlit, you're going to be like, whoa, dad, what's up?
Yeah.
Um,
I like that idea. That's a good point. Firelight, lamplight, all of that kind of stuff. You can only see so far, and outside of that
mhm.
that realm, it's dark, and you have no idea what's in there. Um, yeah. So outside of like that, colors, like to me, again, it's I pull all of these things that I love. So old
Mhm.
books that contain forbidden knowledge that
Yeah.
like it gets and that's Lovecraftian. If it goes beyond Lovecraft, it goes way back, right? The forbidden fruit, the tree of knowledge, all that kind of stuff. And I'm just infinitely obsessed with books and old knowledge. So to me, everything kind of revolves around that, and I try not to do it too much, but I know that that's me. That's like, you know how Del Toro does like the little spiral on everything?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
and from Blade to Hellboy, you see the little spiral. Like, for me, it's the old book and the yellow pages, you know? So it's like the forbidden knowledge, the hidden things. Yeah, no gore in my comics at all, virtually, I would say. Virtually none. Um,
Uh, Here's an interesting comment. If a horror story, a movie, a show be scary in the daytime, that is a real feat. Does reading or looking at horror books at night make it scarier?
yes. For me, it has. I grew up reading. There's a series of books called Necroscope, and I always mention them just because they were like my first books. I'm reading them like I'm 13 or something. They're really well done horror, but I would read them late at night. You know, I'm like 12, 13 years old. Really inappropriate stuff in these books, by the way, for a 12 or 13-year old. I mean, extraordinarily inappropriate stuff. But anyway, um, yeah, everybody's asleep in the house, right? And you're the only one
Hmm.
awake, and you look out the window, and everyone in the neighborhood, there's not a light on anywhere, and you're the only one awake. To me, that just like adds to the effect for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe we would put this in one of our universal horror things as well. Is things you can't see in the dark?
Yeah.
Because throughout all cultures, like I'm not aware of any cultures that are like, oh, thank God the sun's down, we're safe now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Um, all sorts of animals, and not even just animals, just villagers who want to come and kill you. They can sneak in at night and do that.
Yep.
Dark is definitely evil, and or at least could contain evil. Although, is there a horror film set in the daytime that anybody can think of? Um,
Well, I mean, there are
scenes.
some, like I'm thinking Dawn of the Dead,
Hmm.
that takes place during the daytime, but even then I would say that it doesn't do it any favors. Um
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, I can't think of any or many.
Um, what else? What else do I think about as horrors? At least in my stuff,
Hmm.
um, I like to think I take a human, and I like to just to twist them a little. So you'll see a lot of my characters are just are very much like that. The like the monks in that library where they organize by smell.
Hmm.
They're humanoid for sure. They're tall. They have wraps around their eyes, but they have two tongues. You know, so I
Mm.
just like taking a person, and I guess that would be considered body horror, but body horror might be different. I guess body horror is more like The Thing or something.
Yeah, I kind of wonder too. That's another thing where I wonder if there's something genetically in us that goes far into our past. Because if you go back far enough, there were other human species that were around when ours were. So, I think part of the uncanny valley thing,
Hmm.
which for people who don't know, like if you have 3D movie, 3D animation, the uncanny valley is when people don't when you're trying to make something photorealistic, but it doesn't quite look human. Like there's something that just makes it really uncomfortable. And I wonder if stuff like that, because you do see like giants, you see other like lizard people showing up all throughout history. So it makes me wonder if that's goes back to a time when there were other humanoids that maybe we were fighting with.
Hmm. That's a good point. Yeah, so you have like Neanderthals and Homo
Hmm.
sapiens at the same time, and then obviously you have variations within that too,
Yep.
like some maybe somebody looked like more like a lizard, you know, little
Yeah,
cousin Bobby, came out a little scaly, and it could have
yeah.
been maybe just a disease, right? Just like
Could have been
a
psoriasis.
yeah, exactly, something like that. And then that just turns into a fear, like, oh, you don't want to end up like cousin Bobby.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Um, so yeah, I think potentially that is, you know, if you want to get somebody on a on like just an instinctual creepy level, that's one way to go with it.
And I do think, and this is where I think Lovecraft, well, Edgar Allan Poe too, obviously,
Hmm.
but like the idea of like family and lineage,
Yeah.
real. I mean, Lovecraft really took it to an extreme. Like everybody's like, oh, it turns out I have fish parents. Oh, it turns out like you can always trace it back. But that's always a very that's a fear, I think. Um, Pouring out for cousin Bobby. Yeah, he got left behind. The village moved when cousin Bobby was like bathing in the river.
Yeah.
Um, Lineage and stuff like that for me is a big deal. Like I do
Mhm.
have a horror story that I've been wanting to do, and it deals a lot with like family lineage
Hmm.
and curses
Interesting.
and things like that. So
Uh, yeah,
um,
I don't know. There's, I have a love hate relationship with that. Like, even if you think of something like Lord of the Rings, like everybody outside of the Hobbit, like had some kind of magnificent lineage. So if you didn't have those hobbits who were just like normal people doing what they could to, even if it were somewhat reluctantly, to make the world a better place, like that's good. But I hate, I don't know if you've ever read the Sword of Shannara series.
hmm.
It's like one of the earliest Tolkien ripoffs. I think the first one is 77, 78, and it's like there's humans, and then they meet some elves and some dwarves, and there's some gnomes, and I think I might have called them orcs or something else. But it's always like going down the years, the same family. So you're like 1,500 years later, and it's like the same family. It's like, can't other people do things too?
Well, I think yeah, you can take it that way. One is like you come from a line of kings, therefore there's something special about you,
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
you come from a line of fish people and you're bound to, go into the water at some point in time. I think there's a middle ground that I would like to try
Yeah.
with my book, which is a little it's actually a play on that. Um,
Now,
but I get
curses
it.
interest me a lot more. That kind of stuff I find very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever get a chance to do it. Like as I finish up issue 4. um, hey, there, right there is Dagon, right there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Anyway, I like it's as you finish up a project, you kind of get giddy on what the next thing you're gonna do is. Um, because this is the best time. Because after deciding, then it's misery until you finish it.
5 more years until you finish. Yeah. Um, so, when we look at modern horror, certainly it has shifted over. I would say, like, the thing that people think of most would be films or maybe TV shows. Um, do you think that horror still has a place in written literature and art, like not non video art?
So I think yes, for sure. I like it more in just art than movies. I think horror movies, much like porn, is like we have all that we'll ever need. And we can just go back to the good stuff if we need to. No, I like I've been seeing a lot of like paintings that
Hmm.
when you see them, they look like a Baroque masterpiece. But then you're like, you get a little closer, and like I said before, like it's actually kind of horror. So I like the idea of just pouring like the highest skill you can into something and but making it horror without the guts and the gore and all that kind of stuff. So I love that idea of like subtle horror, in art and paintings to the point where we just it works on both levels. I always think about Kent Williams, the artist.
Hmm.
He does fine art, but he did Havoc and Wolverine and he did The Fountain. So like you can live in both worlds, I think, pretty easily. So yeah, I think absolutely. As far as written stuff, I don't know. Man, there's a lot of horror novels, and I've been reading them for my whole life, and I feel like I don't know if there's any new good horror. It doesn't, and it does. When I say new, I mean original. Now, does it need to be original? I don't know. Sometimes you want something that's like something else, and that's good
Yeah.
enough. I mean, I've written some horror short stories, which I'll be releasing at some point in time.
Ooh.
Do they need to be written? Probably not, but I want to write them. So,
Yeah, I think for the modern world, like there's always going to be new circumstances that come up, like cell phones and social media and just the way that we interact with the world is always different. So I can see new horror or new horror subgenres like popping up every now and again, filling a need. Um, but I think for the most part, it's like it's good if you have like some new take on something, or if you have mastered like if you're doing body horror, if you've mastered it in a way that it makes it like an exemplar
yeah.
within its domain. I think that's certainly worth news stories.
Yeah, I think about like we'll use the gangster genre as an example in movies.
Mhm.
Has anything surpassed Goodfellas and The Godfather?
Mm.
And I think no. Countless Sopranos ripoffs and ripoffs of ripoffs of Sopranos, and
Yeah.
I wonder about that. I feel like I, John Wick is another good example. When John Wick came out, I loved that first movie because it was the first time we saw that sort of action and choreograph. If I see another John Wick clone, I'm gonna lose my mind. Like I'm gonna lose it.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, I think of it this way though. Like, think of all the action movies that were in the 80s and 90s. You say like, oh, well, we don't need any more action. But then John Wick comes out. And it's like for a while everything was like a version of Die Hard on a train,
yeah,
Die Hard on a plane, and then eventually that sort of wore itself out, and we ended up with John Wick, and Nobody, which I like as well, the first one at least.
I
Uh,
haven't seen that.
it's good. It's in the vein of John Wick, but it is a little bit different because it's basically about a guy who's living a suburban life. Um, and I'll leave that at there. And like to me, that's the difference. Is there's a bit more of a story, and like middle aged man longing for more or longing for his glory days. Um, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I do remember that. So that's actually what I was saying. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, like it's not exactly, but it's similar. And somebody mentioned Snatch. Snatch is a great movie. So I'm not saying there aren't like other good gangster movies.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I don't know if we've ever surpassed the great ones when they came out. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
it's like if you're in the mood for a Guy Ritchie gangster film, but Guy Ritchie's not making a gangster film, there
Yeah.
might be a substitute, and for you that works.
Well, I think again, it's like part of it is the deconstruction. Part of it, like they want to, like, I'm thinking of Tom Hanks and what was that movie, Road to Perdition.
That's a great
Like
movie.
he it's a good movie, but like he's a murderer and they want us to sympathize with a murderer, and I think that it's gone too far where the bad guys aren't bad enough and the good guys do a lot of really bad stuff. So it's for something's going on with with this crop of writers. Like they just cannot figure out any sort of moral right or wrong, which I think ultimately hurts all of their stories.
I totally agree, and that's my critique of like The Sopranos and countless gangster movies, like you said, because there's no real good person in any of the movies. I mean, even in Goodfellas, I mean, I'm not saying there's a couple of good characters. At least they're really fascinating, interesting characters to watch. And sometimes it'll get you through the movie, sometimes it won't. Road to Perdition in particular, you're right. I mean,
Mhm.
I never sympathize with Tom Hanks' character at all. I sympathize with the kid. I think
Yeah.
that is kind of where you're supposed to. Um, and I don't know where I was going with this, but yeah, I think these genres grow and grow and grow, and a few float to the surface. We can just make them ad infinitum, and or I think wouldn't it be better to like really try something brand new though? And that's where I get a little annoyed. It's like how many superheroes, how many gangster movies, how many, whatever John Wick movies do we need? Why don't we try to do something very new? Like a guy with a vacuum cleaner on his head. Maybe I don't
Yes.
know. Just randomly.
Yes.
That just came to my head. Something like that.
Do you think Horace would be better live action or animated?
Live action, directed by Terry Gilliam, with Marco Beltrami doing the soundtrack. I haven't thought about this at all, just in case you're wondering. With Scott Krebs as key grip. Uh, so yeah,
Yeah, and for anyone who is interested in what we're talking about here, let's see. No, this way. No, there we go. Horace H. Hoover is a detective with a vacuum cleaner on his head.
at least it looks suspiciously like a vacuum cleaner. I want that caveat, suspiciously. Yeah, it's a cult detective set in the 1920s and 30s, and he sort of goes around town and investigates supernatural, paranormal mysteries. This is sort of a 5-issue miniseries intro to the character in the world. Currently, issue 4 is I'm like literally a week away from finishing it, so
Nice.
I'll be doing a Kickstarter maybe the end of the month or something like that.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. It wraps up sort of a longer arc from 1 to 4, and then issue 5 is going to be a one-off, self-contained story. So yeah, check it out. It's got a little humor, but it's all the things I love in all the stuff we've been talking about for the past hour and a half, like the atmosphere, the sort of the aesthetics of horror, the time period, all that kind of stuff.
And for anyone who is interested, this is HoraceHoover.com. I just posted it in the chat. It is pinned to the top, and I believe it is down in the description as well. So if you missed issues 1 through 3, now is a good time to get in on that. And there was a bundle,
Yeah,
88, 88 pages.
it's a lot of pages. Issue 4 is 38 pages too, so
Wow.
it was a chunk. But I'm like, you know what? I gotta let the story. I gotta pace it so you don't feel like, and we're done. Because that's one of my pet peeves, especially after 3 issues, 4 issues. I'm not gonna just
Yeah.
like cut it. So yeah, check it out. There's a few of those left before the Kickstarter, but check it out.
Very nice. When do you think you might finish up the series? You mentioned it's 5 issue miniseries.
Yeah. So after issue 4, I might take a little break. I mean, I know I'm going to take a break. I want to experiment with some different art styles, with some techniques that I may integrate into issue 5. We'll see. I already have the story written and it plotted out and everything. But I don't know, there's just some art techniques I've been kind of like hankering to do. that still is in line with the other stuff without being too egregious of a change. So
Very
it's
cool.
definitely next year late is when I would be doing issue 5 for sure.
Okay. And then you're free. You're a free man. Um, are you? I know before you were talking on sort of like a mythological fantasy type story. Are you still thinking of that, or?
So I have a couple of stories, and one is sort of like a fantasy horror thing, and the other one I've been also thinking about doing more of like a historical setting of like the Siege of Malta, which is essentially a battle of the Crusades, which I thought might be really
Mhm.
cool. So I'm just kind of playing around with some ideas. I have no idea what people would enjoy. Especially if you like Horace H. Hoover, and I give you like a battle from the Crusades at the Siege of Malta, it's gonna be very different. I don't know if the audience is gonna be down for that. So, but we'll see.
Well, will we ever see Horace or Slurp in the background? Maybe.
I could, you know what, it would be great is an embossed, something like iconography of them in the background, maybe. So I want to keep everything open. I'm also supposed to work with John's Longbox on an issue, but
Oh,
I don't know how all this is going to work yet. And I'm going to be doing oil painting. That is absolutely on the docket. So
wow!
prepare to see some of that.
You're doing one of John's books in oil painting, or
No,
that's a
no, I'm
separate
sorry.
thing. Oh, okay.
Yeah, separate thing.
Ah, very cool.
Well, and if I get hit by a bus, then none of that happens. So
Well, don't do that at least until you get issue 5 out. We
for
got to
sure,
finish the series. Don't be all manga on us.
I will stay away from buses until then.
Excellent, excellent. Um, so, other than horror, is there anything else we should be on the lookout, or this is maybe it for the year?
I think this is it for the year. Yeah, like I said, I want to, as an artist or writer or whatever, you really want to take some time to like go back to your roots, maybe look at fundamentals again, see, because at the end of this, it'll be 130, 140 pages of art I've done. And it's a good time to like look at it all and say, okay, what are my weak spots? Where did I
Mhm.
grow? And, how can I make sure that I improve? Because if not, I mean, like some artists will go
Yep.
20 years and never improve or get worse. I'm not
Yep.
talking about Rob Liefeld at all in this. I'm not
It's me.
mentioning.
You're talking about me. Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing. I think a lot of like teaching positions and whatnot, they used to have sabbatical years, and same with the hospitals, and you were supposed to go out and learn new techniques and or practice in a different way. And I think for artists that's important too. Like, let me just I don't use dip pens. Let me try dip pens.
Yep.
Or I never learned Procreate. Let me learn Procreate for a year and see what I can do with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's super important, and I have it, already planned. So
Excellent, excellent. Well, everyone, this is a busy week for me. Tomorrow night, I have Dundermoose coming on at 9 p.m. We're going to be talking about Appendix N from the original Dungeon Master's Guide from 74, 75.
wow.
Appendix N, for anyone who doesn't know, is all of the works that inspired them to create Dungeons and Dragons. So we're gonna take a look at that, figure out what were their inspirations for horror, and we're gonna come up with new additions for Appendix N.
That sounds
Oh,
cool.
we got a question here. What do you think about Cross by Garth Ennis?
Crossed. I don't think I know that.
I don't know that either. I'm not a fan of Garth Ennis in general, but I actually don't like most of those guys from the 90s.
It depends for me.
He did Preacher.
I know, and I liked Preacher at the time, so Yeah, I really liked Preacher, but I don't know Crossed at all.
Yeah, I don't know. And then on the 16th, if you are up very early on the morning of the 16th, or late at night on the evening of the 15th at midnight, the witching hour, I have Cat Rocha. We are going to be talking about cults, religious horror, and witchcraft.
Oh man, I gotta be there for that.
And there are more guests coming up the next 2 weeks to round out the month. So yeah, come stop on by and go back Empire of the Undying Sun. You know you want to.
Do it.
Where just like one more will push us over that $10,000 mark. So
That's great.
that's my pitch.
Yes, go buy it.
All right. So good night, everyone, and hopefully